If I could give my unsolicited advice for a few moments for spiritual practitioners and people trying to gain some kind of success or meaningful benefit from their spiritual path and tradition, it would be this: just practice. Don't think about practicing, don't talk about practicing, don't imagine you're going to practice more later. Don't put your practice off into the future and say, well, 1 year and everything's better, I'm going to practice. No, no. Just practice. Don't think about it. Just sit and do it. Pick a time every single day, in the morning, in the evening, before you go to work, after work, to sit down, put your butt on your meditation cushion, and actually do the work. And that is how you're going to derive benefit from it. Yes, of course, there's far more to spirituality than daily practice. There are many more things involved. But daily practice is the cornerstone of spiritual development and perfection because it broadens your horizons of who you are. The whole spiritual path is about self-knowledge. It's about self-discovery, understanding who we are in relation to ourselves and everything else around us. But because of living a mundane way of life, especially the way that we're brought up now in the world, to live incredibly mundane lives, that way of life limits tremendously our view of ourselves, our understanding of ourselves. We have a very narrow frame of reference for who we are. We have five senses, and we have our thoughts and ideas about stimulus and experiences we've had with those five senses. So it's a very short window, a very short space for us to work with. And then we go to sleep, and most people don't even remember their dreams, or if they do, their dreams are completely chaotic. They don't have any lucidity or clarity in them. And then there's a few hours a night where you just completely disappear. You fall off the map each night for a few hours, and then come back to in the morning. So for most people, their window of experience with themselves is incredibly small, very limited. And it's very hard to learn more about yourself, let alone to try to directly experience that you're something more than the body. If you aren't doing anything any day to push the horizons of your normal bodily existence into something more psychological or even spiritual, to try to push the boundaries of how you've defined yourself and of how you relate to yourself, so that you begin to have some experiences that directly challenge your relationship to yourself that you've developed throughout your life, which is the whole purpose of spiritual practice. Spiritual practice is there to challenge, to directly confront your own notions about reality and who you are. If you practice regularly, you will have experiences that defy many of the ideas about yourself and about the world that you've had up until now. You'll have experiences that completely contradict your normal day-to-day mundane life. And then you need to engage in a process of trying to understand how to relate these experiences to each other. How can there be contradictory experiences being had by the same being? Meditation is there to help give you more tools to understand yourself with. Spiritual disciplines and practices help introduce you to new ways of thinking, to new ways of relating to yourself and others, to new ways of understanding yourself and understanding your place in the world. Without spiritual practice, even if you try to completely limit yourself and say, well, practice isn't needed, like very popular now in modern Advaita movements to say there's no practice, there's no guru, there's no teaching, just sit and be yourself. Well, your idea of yourself, most likely at the moment, is just something made of five senses, something that is very tangible and corporeal. And without regular daily practice, you're sitting with the wrong idea of self. The Advaita self is not that bodily self. But try as you might, you can't imagine a non-bodily self because you've handicapped yourself. You limited yourself tremendously by robbing yourself, depriving yourself of the tremendous blessing of spiritual practice, of disciplined sadhana in one's daily life. So the most important piece of advice I could ever give to any spiritual practitioner, to any aspirant on the path to perfection, is to actually do the practice. There's a Buddhist saying, or at least the first time I read it was in a Buddhist text, that says we spend the first part of our lives not knowing the Dharma. I mean, we spend the first part of our lives growing up, we don't know anything about a spiritual reality or spiritual world, most of us. Then it says we spend the next part of our life going to learn about the Dharma. So now we're learning, we're studying, we're meeting different teachers, we're reading books, we're trying different things out. It says we spend the next part of our life, third part of our life, going to practice the Dharma tomorrow. And this is actually where most people get stuck. They get stuck in these second and third parts of either they become obsessed with the process of learning, which gives them a false sense of forward motion, a false sense that they're making improvements, or they get obsessed with this idea that one day, somehow magically, everything's just going to be right. Somehow, magically, one day, your whole life will snap into place and you'll now be able to dedicate the time every single day to your practice that you always wanted to. And chances are that is never going to happen. You have to practice now, not tomorrow, not tonight. You practice now. Make it about today instead of later. Just like if you want to be successful at anything, it begins now. So the last part of that statement is, they say we spend the first part of our life not knowing the Dharma, second part of our life learning the Dharma, third part of our life going to practice the Dharma tomorrow, and the sad part of the saying is it says we spend the fourth, the final part of our lives wishing we had practiced the Dharma. And this is where a lot of people end up at. So don't allow yourself to end up here. There's no reason you should end up there. Do the work. Don't get too brainy about it. Don't get too intellectual about it. If you do the work, all kinds of interesting things will begin opening up. And you can get introduced to some different ways of life, some different experiences in life that will help develop you and further you along in your spiritual path. So these are some thoughts I had for people who are out there practicing whatever spiritual tradition it may be, and they're having some hiccups or they don't know what they're doing wrong. My basic advice is just do the work. Actually put in the effort. Do the practice. Don't get too brainy about it. Don't come up with a bunch of different definitions about what the work is or what practice is, or whether you should practice or not. Are you Advaita? Are you dualistic? Are you non-dual? Don't get too caught up in those things. Just pick a time each day, sit in a corner, do some practice, and a lot of those other problems will just solve themselves for you. So thank you, and I hope you enjoyed this.